They said mermaids were just fairy tales. But what if the ocean was hiding monsters born from angels' rebellion? You see, what I'm about to tell you is not folklore, it's memory. A memory that humanity tried to erase with charming stories and songs of romance. But the Book of Enoch, an ancient text long hidden from the biblical canon, refuses to be silenced. It reveals a terrifying origin. Mermaid sirens were never magical beings of wonder. They were cursed spirits born from an unholy union, daughters of a cosmic error. Yes, fallen angels, the Watchers, defied heaven and descended not by divine order, but by personal desire to lie with human women. And what happened next? The Nephilim were born insatiable giants, but the women, too, paid a price, transformed into creatures of the abyss. Faces still beautiful, but eyes heavy with eternal judgment. Voices that no longer sing but curse. Are you still picturing mermaids on rocks singing to sailors in love? That image is a lie, and what the Book of Enoch reveals is only the beginning. Comment 7-127 if you're ready to dive deep. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You're about to uncover one of the darkest, most forbidden chapters in spiritual history. Mermaids and Fallen Angels, the strangest chapter in the Book of Enoch. Have you ever stood at the edge of the sea, not merely to gaze, but to listen, to feel? When the wind dies and the waves hush, have you noticed it? That eerie stillness where the world seems to hold its breath, where something deep beneath the surface seems to awaken. What if I told you that the pull you feel in those moments isn't wonder, but warning? That beneath those dancing waves lies an ancient truth we've tried desperately to forget. Humanity, in its fear, painted over it with colors of innocent fairy tales, soft melodies, stories of love between sailor and siren. But the sea has a memory, and so do we. Not in our minds, but in our spirits. And tonight, that memory resurfaces, cold and relentless. In the shadows of sacred texts long hidden from public eyes, one book dares to expose what others dare not whisper. The Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch doesn't invite us to fantasy. It pulls us into remembrance. Personal confession. When I first read this, I closed the book and didn't open it for days. Not out of disbelief, but awe. Suddenly, every myth seemed like a veil, every wave a whisper from a fallen soul. Can you imagine what it would be like to witness angels, those radiant, powerful beings created to dwell in God's glory, abandon the heights of heaven, not because they were commanded to, but because they wanted to picture the sky torn open, not by war, but by desire? That is the chilling truth the Book of Enoch dares to reveal. It tells of the Watchers, divine beings sent to observe humanity who betrayed their sacred post. They descended not for justice, not for mercy, but for flesh, for the beauty of mortal women. It wasn't one or two, it was a full rebellion. A pact sealed under stars, now ashamed to shine upon it. What would you have done if you were there in those early days, when heaven still walked close to earth? Would you have seen them coming cloaked in light, but burning with hidden thirst? Would you have known what danger hid behind their heavenly forms? According to the Book of Enoch, these angels lay with human women, and from this forbidden union came the Nephilim giants, half angel, half man. They were born not in peace, but in imbalance. Their strength crushed the earth. Their presence bent the laws of nature. They devoured, destroyed, dominated. The world began to rot from within. Even the ground, it seems, could feel the violation. Genesis 6:4 briefly hints at these events. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. But Enoch opens the curtain wider, exposing the grotesque aftermath. And yet there's a part of this story, often forgotten, hidden behind fear and shame. What happened to the women? Those women who bore children to angels were not left unchanged. Their bodies, marked by the stain of celestial trespass, were twisted by divine judgment. They were cursed not with fire or plague, but with transformation. Their form morphed into something not fully human, not fully spirit beings of the deep, forever tied to the waters. Their faces remained hauntingly beautiful, but their eyes carried the sorrow of judgment. Their voices, once used to sing lullabies or weep in prayer, became instruments of torment. They no longer needed language. They spoke through vibrations in the soul. Their songs were not love songs. They were dirges, songs of despair that lured ships to ruin. This was the birth of the sirens, not the playful mermaids you've seen in movies, not the wide-eyed girls with shells and smiles. That image is a clever lie, a mask to cover an ancient horror. The original sirens were not dreamers of romance, but daughters of rebellion. They emerged from abyssal waters with pale, razor-edged scales. Their mouths held rows of sharp teeth, yet they often didn't open them. Why speak when you can speak directly to a man's thoughts? Their power was not brute strength. It was manipulation, mental domination. They fed on weakness, on temptation, on curiosity. Have you ever stared into the ocean and felt a pull not from the tide, but from something deeper, older? Have you ever imagined a voice calling your name though no one was near? What if it wasn't imagination? What if it was memory? Some sailors tell stories of creatures with black, depthless eyes and smiles that knew too much. Creatures that didn't just lure you in, they understood you as if they'd been waiting. Can you really be sure those stories were myths? Or are they echoes of a spiritual war still raging beneath the waves? This is the part of the Book of Enoch that shakes the soul. It doesn't just record what happened, it warns of what still is. And if the sirens were born from that first act of rebellion, then perhaps they still sing. Perhaps they still wait. You might be tempted to brush all of this aside, to call it myth, to label it fantasy, to claim it's all been exaggerated by fear or twisted by imagination. Maybe you think it's just a dark tale told too often, or that the interpretation is too dreadful to be real. But before you dismiss it, I ask you to pause. Ask yourself this: why do civilizations oceans apart, separated by language, time, and culture, all speak of the same kind of creature? How is it that societies that never met, never traded scrolls or dreams, somehow carved the same warnings into stone and story? In ancient Greece, the sirens were never sweet. They were feared. Monstrous beings with voices like honey, but hearts of ruin. Their songs dragged men to watery graves, not out of hatred, but out of hunger. To the Norse, the sea was ruled by entities with no mercy, creatures that rose before storms and devoured ships whole. In Egypt, we find tales etched into tombs of half-human, half-beast figures who slipped between the world of the living and the realm of the dead through the waters of the Nile. And among the ancient peoples of the Americas, from the Andean mountains to the Caribbean islands, legends abound of beautiful water women with eyes that could see through the soul spirits, who blessed or cursed at will, who never quite belonged to either world. These cultures never shared a common history. They didn't speak the same tongue. They didn't worship the same gods. And yet, they all described the same presence, the same figure hidden in the deep, the same voice singing from beneath the waves. How can that be? Coincidence? Can thousands of years of storytelling across continents all be explained by accident? Or are these myths, these haunting echoes, scattered fragments of a singular forgotten truth? The Book of Enoch offers us a daring suggestion. Perhaps these stories weren't born from dreams, but from judgment. Perhaps what we call mythology is the long memory of a spiritual rebellion we no longer understand. Perhaps the mermaids, sirens, and sea spirits are not fiction, but the children of something ancient, something cursed, something that still stirs beneath the surface of the waters. There's a passage in the Bible that most readers skip over without a second thought, a single line hidden within the majestic vision of Revelation, and the sea was no more Revelation. 21:1. At first glance, it seems poetic, metaphorical, a beautiful image of peace and stillness. But if we dare to look deeper through the lens of the Book of Enoch and the fragments of ancient texts long buried or forgotten, we begin to see a far more unsettling truth. The sea in Scripture and in many ancient traditions is never neutral. It is not just water. It is the boundary between the known and the unknown, the cradle of chaos, the womb of exiled spirits. It is where the banished dwell, where the fallen were sent, where the consequences of rebellion fester unseen by the eyes of the living. To erase the sea in the new creation is not simply to redraw the geography of a renewed earth. It is an act of divine cleansing, a final purge, a closing of the gates that once opened into the abyss. In this light, the statement, "the sea will be no more," is a cosmic declaration. It means the time of fallen dominions will end. The sirens once whispered about in myths, romanticized in fairy tales, are unmasked. They are not harmless beauties of the tides. They are remnants, reminders of the watcher's sin and the women who bore the curse. Their presence in the waters is a scar on creation, a living echo of heaven's defiance. You may be tempted to say, but surely no one has ever seen a real mermaid. And yet, that's not entirely true. From medieval sailors to indigenous shamans, from 16th century missionaries to modern divers and lonely travelers, there have been stories, dozens of them, spread across the centuries. Testimonies from people with no reason to lie, no connection to each other, describing the same thing, a woman-like figure, rising from the deep eyes like obsidian movements, both graceful and inhuman. In nearly every account, the witnesses speak not of spoken words, but of thoughts planted directly into the mind. Emotions not their own. Paralyzing fear, overwhelming sorrow, irresistible fascination. One story stands out. A woman went swimming alone in a lake far from civilization. As she floated in the stillness, a figure surfaced quietly, almost reverently. It had a human face, yet something was off, something ancient and alien in its gaze. The eyes were bottomless black, as if cut from the void itself. And then came the voice, not through sound, but through thought. Words she did not hear, but understood. Feelings she could not explain yet, could not deny. In that moment, she said she felt her identity slipping away as if a foreign soul had brushed hers. The memory left her shaken for years. Was it madness, a hallucination? Or was it contact with one of the ancient spirits cursed to wander beneath the waters waiting to be remembered? Perhaps the real question is not whether they exist, but why we have spent so long trying to convince ourselves they don't. So when Revelation tells us that the sea will be no more, perhaps it is not a poetic flourish, but a prophecy, a warning, a promise that, in the final act of divine restoration, even the waters must give up their dead. Even the sirens must be silenced. The sirens described in the Book of Enoch are not just creatures of ancient fear. They are symbols, living metaphors etched into flesh. They embody transgression, not the kind that fades with time, but the kind that echoes eternally across the fabric of creation. They are the fruit of desire, severed from divine purpose of longing that broke its boundaries and chose rebellion over reverence. Every movement of their distorted bodies, every flicker of their half-human beauty, bears the memory of a choice one that shook the heavens, cracked the harmony of earth, and dragged both angels and mortals into shadow. They are not merely monsters or myths. They are spiritual artifacts, cursed relics of a celestial war. Dwelling on the thin border between light and dark, between reality and folklore, these entities might be far closer to our world than we dare to admit. And here is something to ponder. Most ancient myths exist to teach, to warn, to reveal hidden truths through metaphor. But what if one of those myths is not allegory at all? What if it is a distorted recollection, a fossilized memory of real events? The Book of Enoch does not just tell the tale of the Watchers or the towering Nephilim. It reveals the lingering consequences of their fall. The Nephilim were not merely giants of physical power. They were carriers of a deeper rot, a spiritual cancer that bled into the earth and infected everything it touched. In this light, the sirens are not just eerie creatures with alluring songs. They are living witnesses to a divine contamination fragments of a broken story still playing out beneath the surface of the sea. Their presence in the depths reminds us that the curse was never fully erased. It was submerged. They drift silently through the waters, like monuments to the day heaven was challenged. Every wave that crashes on the shore might be a whisper from them, a cry, a warning. And yet humanity, bold, distracted, and blind, has chosen not to remember. We've painted the sirens in soft light, turned them into muses and fairy tale lovers perched on rocks under moonlight. We've romanticized what was meant to terrify. But the ancient texts do not lie. What once caused angels to fall and women to transform still lingers. The ocean, vast and unknowable, is the perfect vault for humanity's forgotten guilt. It buries the past, conceals the broken covenant, and cradles the spirits of rebellion. But remember, this forgetting is not the same as forgiving. Time does not heal a wound when the cause remains. And one day, the sea may no longer be silent. One day, what was hidden might rise. Have you ever stopped to wonder, what if the sirens are not hunters but sentinels? Not beasts seeking prey, but watchers standing at the fractured gates between two realms, the world of the living and the dominion of the damned. Because if the Book of Enoch tells us that the Watchers were cast into the abyss, and their monstrous children, the Nephilim, were swallowed by the judgment of God, then what became of the women? The women who were transformed through forbidden unions. They were not restored. They were not embraced. They were not saved. They were cursed, abandoned to the tides, condemned to drift endlessly in the waters as half-creature, half-memory living scars of an ancient rebellion. Their humanity dissolved, their redemption denied. They remain not to kill, but to bear witness. Perhaps that is the true terror of the deep. Every lost vessel, every name whispered by the sea breeze, every unsolved vanishing may be less an act of malevolence and more a cry from those who were exiled to a prison without walls. Perhaps it is not hatred that drives them, but sorrow, a grief so vast it swells, with the tides rising and falling like the ache of a soul that remembers Eden but can never return. Have you ever feared the ocean, not for its storms or its creatures, but for something more ancient, a feeling not of danger, but of recognition, as if the soul senses something it cannot explain? That feeling is not madness, it is a memory. In the ancient world, the sea was never neutral. It was chaos incarnate, the realm of the Leviathan, the symbol of all that was ungoverned, impure, and wild. To the Hebrews, the sea stood as a dark mirror, a place untouched by covenant, where order was unmade. And so, when Revelation proclaims that the sea will be no more, it is more than a poetic ending. It is a divine decree. The chaos will be silenced, impurity will be banished, and nothing unholy will remain in the new creation. Against this backdrop, the mermaids of ancient memory make sense. They are not queens of the sea, but inmates, not sovereigns, but shadows. Exiled from earth, rejected by heaven, they dwell in the only place left a restless purgatory of salt and sorrow. The sea becomes their cage, a shimmering limbo, a watery veil where judgment lingers but does not yet fall. And there in the dark places, no man can reach, they wait. They wait in silence, in pain, in the fading echoes of a decision that reshaped eternity. How many generations have come and gone since the first whispers of mermaids echoed through the tides of time? How many centuries have seen their names etched into myth, into lullabies, into nightmares? Thousands of years have passed, and still their presence lingers in paintings, in songs, in stories told beneath stars, to children who don't yet know what fear truly means. Is it all mere coincidence? Or does something deeper, something ancient stir within the human soul whenever we hear their name? It is as if we were born with the memory of them, already embedded in our bones, as if a part of our spirit remembers what history refuses to write. Popular culture has coated them in glitter, and fairy tales turned their mourning into melody and replaced their curse with a crown. The sea witch became a misunderstood queen, and the tragic siren became a singing princess. But no layer of sugar can erase the salt of sorrow. No romance can drown the ancient scream, because beneath the glitter lies a wound, an open wound that bleeds through the veil of time, a wound born of rebellion, of seduction, of a cosmic law broken. The Book of Enoch does not offer comfort. It offers clarity. It removes the mask and demands we confront the uncomfortable truth that sirens may be more than myth, more than symbols. They may be the relics of a spiritual fracture, the echo of a fall too terrible to forget and too shameful to admit. They are not fantasies. They are memorials, floating reminders of the part of ourselves that longs to touch the forbidden, to defy the divine, and the irreversible cost that follows. And maybe you're asking, but if they are real, why is there no absolute proof? But ask yourself, how many true things in this world live just beyond the edge of sight? How many sacred realities cannot be measured or touched, but are felt with a clarity that transcends language? love, evil, the soul, the Holy Spirit? Can you photograph them? Can you hold them in your hand? The mermaids described in the Book of Enoch are not just flesh and bone. They are spirits corrupted by a union that defied heaven's decree. Their very essence is twisted between the spiritual and the material phantoms clothed in water and memory. And the testimonies across ages are far too many to ignore, scribbled in ancient scrolls whispered in medieval convents, recorded in the torn logbooks of lost ships, or confessed by modern-day sailors and divers who will never swim again. Their stories are eerily alike: an unnatural stillness in the water, a haunting song without words, the sudden chill on the back of the neck, the thought that enters the mind without warning, as if someone or something is thinking through you. And then the silence, the vanishing, the madness. People disappear and we blame the sea, but perhaps it's not the sea that takes them. Perhaps it is what the sea contains. Not all truths arrive with thunder and fire. Some crawl in quietly like fog and whisper when your eyes are closed. And sometimes it's the quietest voice that holds the greatest terror. Look ahead, not with the eyes of the body, but with the eyes of the spirit. Imagine the sea not merely as water, not merely as a vast expanse of blue, but as a living book, ancient, sentient, sacred. A scripture not inked by man, but written by time, by judgment, and by the hidden tears of heaven. Each wave is not just a motion, but a line of divine remembrance. Each current carries with it a story, a consequence, a secret that was never meant to surface. The sea holds no lies. It remembers. And what it remembers, it preserves layer by layer, century by century. The mermaids, those sirens that drift through its depths, are not fictional ornaments to amuse our imaginations. They are the footnotes of a fallen chapter in creation, the walking footnotes of celestial disobedience. They are proof, terrifying and undeniable, that what once occurred between angels and mortals did not stay hidden in the heavens or confined to the mountains. It reached the waters. It reached the womb of the earth. And the mermaids are living evidence not of love stories, but of judgment, of curses that still echo. That is why painters keep returning to their image, why filmmakers, authors, and poets across generations continue to resurrect their songs. It's not merely because of their beauty. It's not fascination. It's something deeper. It's recognition, something buried in our blood, in our dreams, in the spaces between generations remembers them. Let us speak plainly now with honesty that cuts through centuries of denial. Not every myth is false. Myths are the bones of forgotten truths. They are the skeletons left behind when memory drowns and history is silenced. Myth is not the opposite of reality. It is reality, disguised reality, blurred by time, softened by culture, hidden beneath metaphor, because the raw truth would scorch the tongue. And of all the myths that have survived, the story of the mermaids has endured the fiercest storms. It has changed shape, changed tone, changed name, but it has never vanished. Why? Because it holds a fragment of cosmic truth. That is why it discomforts us, why it stirs something in the soul, even as we smile and say, it's fantasy. Because deep within, in the place where truth and instinct meet, we know there is something in the ocean that does not belong there, something that was not born of coral or fish, but of defiance and sorrow. Something unnatural, something judged, and the Book of Enoch dares to speak of it without embellishment. It tells us that heaven was breached that the divide between spirit and flesh was crossed irreversibly, and that the waters of those deep and ancient witnesses were stained by the rebellion of divine beings. The offspring of disobedience did not merely live on land, some were claimed by the sea. The sirens are not fairy tales. They are scars that swim. They are wounds that were never allowed to heal. And when you stand by the shore and feel that strange shiver in your bones, maybe you're not imagining it. Maybe the sea remembers you too. Now that you've walked this far along the edge of mystery, I invite you to stop, not with your body, but with your soul, and face the sea once more. Not as a traveler, not as a tourist, but as a witness. What do you feel when you gaze upon that ancient abyss? Do not rush to answer with language. Let your heart respond. Let your spirit tremble. Feel the chill that wraps around your spine like a forgotten prophecy. Feel the weight of questions that are older than language. Feel the memory that pulses within your chest, a memory that is not only yours, but belongs to generations long buried, to civilizations lost beneath waves, to angels who fell, and to humans who listened when they shouldn't have. The sea speaks to all of us, not in words, but in silence. It hums with a song that only the soul can hear, a melody of warnings, of shattered covenants, of echoes we buried because the truth was too heavy to carry. The sirens do not want your understanding. They want your remembrance. For it is not knowledge that saves us from doom. It is memory. It is the act of remembering what we were warned never to repeat. Revelation 21:1 says that in the new heaven and earth, the sea will be no more. Perhaps that is not a metaphor. Perhaps it is a final cleansing, a divine erasure of the place that has carried too many scars. Because in the sea dwells the ghost of rebellion. In it swims the fruit of the forbidden union, the hushed evidence that the line between the divine and the damned was once crossed. The sirens are not beautiful muses. They are tragedy, given form, judgment, made flesh, sorrow dressed in scales and shadow. And as long as mankind dances on the shores and sings songs of romance to the sea, the true danger remains submerged, waiting, watching, whispering. But now you know. Now you've seen through the veil, glimpsed what lies beyond the shimmering surface. That knowledge, once awakened, cannot be undone. The mist has parted, and the truth has found you. The question is, what will you do with it? If something deep within you stirred as you heard this story, if something ancient inside you whispered, "This is not fantasy, this is memory," then you are ready to walk deeper, to unearth what was hidden, to confront what was silenced. You are no longer just a listener. You are a seeker. You begin to realize now that the signs were always there, hidden in plain sight, dressed in myth, camouflaged by culture, diluted into superstition. We thought they were fables told to children, paintings of imagination, folklore whispered to explain the unexplainable. But no, they were warnings, ancient ones, etched not in parchment, but in stone. In coastal caves, stretching from the shadowed cliffs of the Mediterranean to the storm-beaten islands of the South Pacific, cave walls bear images that do not lie. Female figures with scaly, sinuous tails, wide, haunting eyes, and twisted forms caught mid-motion as if dancing or writhing, always near men. And the men, they kneel. They raise their arms. They cower. These are not images of fairy tales. These are relics of memory carved by trembling hands that saw something too real, too terrible to name, and yet too sacred to forget. These markings were not born with Disney. They were born from instinct, the instinct to remember what we were commanded to bury, because fear is hard to kill. Even when stories are silenced, fear carves its way through stone, through bone, through blood. In the crumbling sculptures of forgotten temples, in the flickering glyphs painted on papyrus, in the margins of medieval manuscripts long before the word mermaid existed, the shape was already there. A tale, a face, a song carried by waves. These cultures did not conspire to fabricate a myth. They bore witness to a truth that refused to drown. They knew the waters held forces not of this world, not of the land, not of mankind. The question was never if these beings existed. The real question, the one that still echoes like a groan in the depths, is why were we made to forget? Why did the church exile the Book of Enoch from the canon? Why was this book so ancient, so interconnected with Genesis, Daniel, and Revelation cast aside as if it carried a disease? Why silence a book that spoke so clearly about angels, about rebellion, about unnatural unions? Because the answer is too raw, too unholy. It unmasks the heavenly hosts, not as flawless guardians, but as rebels with passions they could not contain. It tells of a fracture that didn't stop at heaven's gates, but poured like venom into the earth, into the forests, into the mountains, and most hauntingly, into the seas. The Book of Enoch is not merely a text, it is a revelation. It shows the watchers not as celestial onlookers, but as violators of sacred order. It portrays the Nephilim not just as giants, but as cursed echoes of spiritual betrayal. And the women who joined with these fallen beings were seduced, yes, but also willing. Their union with the divine was not only a tragedy, it was a choice that twisted creation itself. And when the flood came, when the judgment fell, not all of them died. Some were transformed. Spirits bound to water, flesh made into myth, and they have floated through time ever since, not as fairy tales, but as reminders that some sins ripple through the centuries. Erasing Enoch wasn't just about theology. It was a gesture of desperation, a vain attempt to purify heaven's image, while quietly allowing the seas to become the new abyss. If hell has a mirror, it is not fire, it is water, silent, deep, reflective, and full of things that were never meant to exist. There is a reason the sea stirs a deeper fear in the human soul than the land ever could. It is not merely its strength, though its waves have shattered kingdoms. It is not simply its depth, though its trenches swallow mountains whole. Nor is it its vastness, though it stretches like eternity itself. No, the fear is older, quieter, more spiritual. It is a fear not of what is seen, but of what is remembered without knowing why. The sea carries something ancient in its tides, something that moves not with water, but with memory. When we stand before the ocean and feel our skin prickle, when our hearts race without cause, and our eyes search the horizon with unease, it is because our souls recognize the truth that our minds have forgotten. The sea is where heaven buried its shame. The waters hold more than storms and salt. They hold the last breath of the angels who fell. They hold the echo of the moment when eternity was torn open and light spilled into darkness. God, in his infinite justice, did not destroy everything in that rebellion. He sealed part of it. Beneath the waters, beneath the silence, beneath the veil of blue, the sea is not merely an element. It is a prison, a divine abyss, a place untouched by light where no prayer rises and no judgment falls, because judgment has already been given. It is where spirits once touched by heaven, but defiled by sin, are cast souls that fell not far enough to burn, but too far to return. They are conscious. They are waiting. And the sirens, they are not predators in the way men think of predators. They are not animals. They are not temptresses. They are sentinels, guardians of sorrow. Their song is not a lure, it is a cry from before time, a lament that pierces the veil between worlds. They are not alive in the way we understand life, but neither are they dead. They are suspended, fragments of heaven's rebellion, echoes of beings who would not accept their fall, who still sing of the sky even as they drown in its absence. Every time a ship disappears without a trace, every time the ocean swallows men without leaving so much as a plank behind, every time someone claims to have heard a haunting melody where no voice should be, perhaps we should not dismiss it. Perhaps it is not a hallucination. Perhaps it is not madness. Perhaps it is a whisper from the waters reminding us that the first war did not end, that the rebellion still lives, and that its heart now beats in the depths of the sea. Few truly know the depths of what the Book of Enoch reveals. Beyond its chilling descriptions of the Nephilim as monstrous hybrids of immense physical power, it dares to unveil a truth far more unsettling, a truth buried not in bodies but in knowledge. These offspring of angels and mortals did more than walk the earth in violence. They altered the very current of human understanding. Through forbidden unions, they became channels through which celestial knowledge, once sacred, now defiled, was poured into the world. Alchemy, the manipulation of nature's elements. Astrology, the reading of destinies in forbidden stars. Sorcery, the twisting of God's design. And the manipulation of creation itself. All of it gifts not meant for flesh bled through their corrupted lineage like poison in a river. But what if the corruption did not stop with them? What if the women, the mortals, who lay with angels and bore abominations, received not just children, but fragments of that unholy knowledge as well? And what if, when judgment came, and those women were cursed and transformed into aquatic spirits, they carried with them echoes of the sacred secrets they had touched? Then mermaids, as we call them today, would not merely be cursed relics of divine punishment. They would be vessels, guardians of a wisdom so dangerous that heaven itself sealed it beneath the sea. Knowledge of the forces that weave the universe together, knowledge that corrupts the soul just by being known. That would explain the terrifying legends, psychic powers that fracture the mind, hypnosis that does not require a word, only a glance, enchantments that speak without song, that enter the heart without a sound. These are not tricks of illusion. They are residues of an ancient union between flesh and spirit, heaven and earth, purity and ruin. The sirens don't just lure men to their death. They awaken something ancient in us, something buried. So now I will ask you something most are too afraid to consider. I ask not for your opinion, but for your truth. Look inward deeply. What if these tales do not haunt us simply because they happened, but because they belong to us? What if that lingering sense of fear around the ocean, that strange pull toward its depths, that fascination with the inhumanly beautiful, isn't just curiosity? What if it's instinct, an echo, a whisper from an ancient bloodline that has not completely died? Many ancient scrolls, both biblical and apocryphal, claim the Nephilim were never fully destroyed, those remnants remained, that their presence flows through humanity like a cursed inheritance. The original sin that first defianced the fusion between the sacred and the defiled left a scar that no flood could erase. I am not saying you are one of them. I am not saying you bear their blood. But I am saying that your spirit might remember. And if your soul has ever felt shaken by a dream of the deep, ever wept without knowing why, when hearing the sea's song, then perhaps the sirens are not only calling, they are remembering you. If you've come this far with me, then something inside you has already changed. You are no longer just an onlooker, no longer just a wanderer entertained by ancient tales. You have crossed a spiritual threshold. The veil has been lifted. What you once saw as mere water, you now recognize as a mirror of the divine and the damned. You cannot go back to innocence because truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. Curiosity has transformed into responsibility. Awareness demands more than wonder. It demands vigilance. Because when you begin to understand the hidden story behind the waves, you carry a burden not of fear, but of remembrance. The next time you stand at the edge of the sea, do not let your gaze rest only on the shimmering surface. Listen with ears deeper than flesh. Let your spirit sense what your eyes cannot. Feel not just the salt, not just the wind, but the weight of the unspeakable sorrow that saturates those tides. The ocean holds memories, not just molecules. It sings in a tongue older than language, repeating a warning that the world has tried for ages to forget. A story that has been buried by time, distorted by myth, ignored by doctrine, but one that the waves continue to whisper, again and again, with each rising storm and each silent undertow. And when the image of a mermaid crosses your mind, do not be seduced by the songs of romance or the lies of fairy tales. Instead, think of regret, raw, undying, eternal. Think of spiritual consequences that could not be undone. Think of women who crossed a line drawn not by men, but by heaven itself. They were not monsters by nature, but by transformation. Their beauty became their curse, their voice a lament, their immortality, a sentence. They are not fantasies. They are echoes of a time when love defied divine boundaries and desire reshaped creation. They are not just forgotten legends. They are living remnants of a spiritual rebellion that refuses to die. They are the scars of celestial disobedience still bleeding into the present. The sirens are not fiction. They are warnings carved in flesh and water, symbols that show what happens when the sacred is profaned, when what should have stayed apart becomes one, when love untamed and forbidden breeds curses that ripple through generations. So now we return to the Book of Enoch, that ancient manuscript left in the shadows. It is not just a record of angels and giants. It is a mirror held up to humanity, daring us to really look at what we've forgotten, what we've denied, what we've buried beneath centuries of silence. But the decision remains ours. Will we shut it again, comforted by ignorance, lulled by myth? Or will we open it fully, let the pages cut, and let the truth rise like a tide too long held back? The ocean remembers, the sirens sing, and now you have heard them. But if the mermaid was never meant to enchant, but to remind them, what else have we misunderstood? What other legends are quietly covering up the echoes of a sacred past, desperately trying not to be remembered? Could it be that other mythical beings like Cyclops, Nagas, or Gorgons aren't just fantasy? but spiritual remnants of ancient rebellion. Strikingly, civilizations that never met Greek, Indian, Mesopotamian, even pre-Columbian cultures described similar hybrid creatures. They painted them on stone walls, carved them into temples, and feared them in rituals. These weren't coincidences. They were echoes, fragments. Because when angels fell and touched the earth, the result wasn't just one horror, it was a ripple of unnatural life across creation. And what about the sea itself? Why does the Bible say, "The sea will be no more"? Revelation 21:1. At first glance, it feels symbolic, but in ancient Hebrew cosmology, the sea was never peaceful. It was chaos, the dwelling place of Leviathan, the monstrous symbol of evil. Job 41, Isaiah 27:1. Even prophesies God's judgment upon Leviathan, the fleeing serpent of the sea. So when Revelation declares the sea's end, it is not just about geography. It's about purification. It's about erasing the hidden domain of condemned spirits, the place where heaven once cast down its fallen. That's where the fragments of the fall reside. That's where the cursed drift creatures that once crossed divine boundaries and were never meant to exist. The mermaid in this light is not alone. She is one of many parts of a hidden lineage born not of blessing, but of transgression. And isn't it strange how we as humans are so captivated by these forbidden beings? Why do we romanticize the curse? Why do our stories turn monsters into misunderstood beauties? Perhaps it's not just fantasy. Perhaps it's instinct. Genesis 6:4 speaks of the Nephilim offspring of angels and women. They weren't just giants in stature, but in spiritual influence. Ancient traditions, especially texts like the Book of Enoch, claim that these hybrids pass down forbidden knowledge of alchemy, sorcery, manipulation of creation. That knowledge that spiritual contamination may still echo in us, not through DNA, but through memory. A fascination that feels like curiosity, but maybe inheritance. And if sirens truly exist, why don't we have proof? The better question is, how do you capture a cursed spirit with a lens? The sirens in Enoch are not fully physical. They are spiritual remnants shaped by divine wrath. That's why reports across centuries and cultures are so eerily similar. Black eyes, psychic voices, feelings of paralysis, and mental invasion near water. These are not fables. They are patterns, consistencies. Like all spiritual truths, they are not always seen, but they are always felt. So why then was the Book of Enoch removed from the Bible? Because it reveals too much. It doesn't soften the fall of the angels, it exposes it. It shows the Nephilim not as myths, but as spiritual errors that polluted creation. And it tells of the women who joined the Watchers, not just as victims, but as participants. Their punishment was not symbolic, it was transformation, condemnation. They became the sirens, and that truth was too raw, too dangerous. Easier to bury the book than face the memory. But some truths refuse to stay buried. Could it be then that the sea is not just vast water, but a prison? Peter 2:4 tells us God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness. And Jude 1:6 confirms they are kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Where are these chains? Some believe they lie beneath the deep in a realm hidden from sight, yet closer than we think. That's why Revelation 13:1 warns of a beast rising out of the sea. The sea is not innocent. It is sealed, and one day it will be drained, not to make space, but to remove what no longer belongs in a restored creation. And now, we stand at the shoreline of something deeper. When you face the ocean and feel unease, as if something ancient and aware is watching from beneath the surface, you're not imagining it. When you're haunted by songs of sirens or dreams of drowning eyes, you're not just dreaming, you're remembering. Because mermaids are not just symbols of forbidden love, they are the scars of forbidden union. They are not dreams, they are warnings. And the sea, for all its beauty, may be less a mirror of wonder and more a door we were never meant to open. What can we learn from this strange and ancient tale, where angels abandoned their posts, where sacred knowledge was traded for lust, where giants trampled innocence, and the earth cried out beneath the weight of corrupted blood? This is more than a myth. It's a warning. When boundaries set by God are broken, when power is divorced from holiness, when beauty becomes manipulation, destruction follows. The sins of the Watchers are not locked in the past. They echo in today's world in the glorification of forbidden knowledge, in humanity's thirst for control, in the rebellion against divine order. Are we so different from them? Yet even in judgment, there is a whisper of redemption. You see, the Book of Enoch was hidden for centuries, but now you are hearing it. That is not a coincidence. You were meant to see this, to feel it, to awaken, because God is still watching, and the battle between light and darkness is not over. It rages in our hearts, our homes, our choices. Will you be vigilant? Will you guard the gates of your soul? If this revelation stirred something in you, a question, a fire, a trembling, then don't stay silent. Comment 777 below to declare your allegiance to the God of heaven. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who need to know the truth hidden beneath the waves. Thank you, warrior of light, for walking this journey with us. May your eyes remain open, your heart remain pure, and your spirit remain unshaken. Until we meet again in the next mystery, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Stay strong, stay watching,